YouTube, did you really think that I was just gonna let you listen to music, not say a word, and try to cut this blindfolded? Nah, I'm gonna explain the whole thing to you. So, let's get started. Alright. But you're listening to Mr. Eddie Barber, and I'm gonna break this down to you step by step. As always, much love for tuning in. Now, I'm gonna begin this how I begin a lot of my skin fades, and I'm using my 5-0. If you notice, this kid has kid neck. And what is kid neck? That's when the kids sit all funny, and a lot of times their neck is still not fully grown out yet, so it's not flat and nice like an adult. So there's some tricks to that you can use. If you can convince this kid to sit straight up in the chair like this, get his shoulders all the way back, pull his shoulders back, and then adjust his head down. Then you're going to find out that his neck is going to get flat, and it's going to be much easier for you. I did not do that in this case, but I want to tell you about that. I didn't feel like I needed to. My camera was sort of in my way on this right side here, but anyways, I'm putting the 5-0 line in, and I'm going back in with my Bronze Series 9, and I'm going to ball them out all the way at the bottom. I need to make sure that the transition between skin and my 5-0 line is flawless, and that there is no lines in there, so that when I move on, I can be thorough and I don't have to go back and redo certain steps. I'm going to grab my number 2. I'm going to create some space. I really could have done this first so that I could see what I was doing when I put in that line. When there's too much hair, it's kind of a good thing to remove some bulk and then make life a little bit easier on yourself so you can see what you're trying to work on. So I'm going up just above the occipital bone, right at about the start of the bottom of the crown, and I'm just going to soften that line with clipper over comb as we go a little further down the video. But you see that this grain is growing all different ways, and I'm gonna have to meet it in different directions just to keep going against the grain. I need to get this all down to a number 2, and then all I have to do is get my skin to number 2 transition perfect. Beginning once again, as I always do, with a 1-inch line, secondary guideline, with my open taper. I do this a lot of times all in one step, meaning that I will begin, after I got my line just right on both sides, I will begin closing the taper down in small incremental steps and wiping out that line. As you can see, it's beginning to soften, and just little by little, every time I close it down, I stay just a little bit lower than I was in the previous area that I worked. Again, with curly hair, you're going to have to meet whatever directional changes there are. It can be challenging because the curly hair is not going to be exactly the same as it is to cut other kinds of straighter hair. So I need to make sure that I'm meeting all these directional changes, and especially if the neck shape is a little bit different, that can also throw you for a loop or cast shadows in directions that you might not actually have. There might not be any mistakes that you make, but sometimes the shadows will come from the way the lighting is hitting the neck. So be careful to watch for that, and continue keeping your clipper on an angle, or only putting one of the corners down, and that's going to help. That's going to stop you from making extra mistakes and causing extra work for yourself and making a new line a little bit higher up. So it looks like I'm beginning to finish up that step, and I'm going to make sure that the blend is smooth. And once again, I'm going to do the same thing that I try to tell you guys I do a lot, and I skip my half guard. When I begin this next process, it's going to be with the number 1. Once I have the number 1 on, I know that I have to stay below where I went with the number 2. I have the number 1 in the open position. I'm going to go very close to where I ended the number 2, and I'm going to stay just below it. As I begin closing the taper with this number 1, I'm going to start trying to keep it on an angle so that I don't create extra work for myself, and I'm also going to be using the corners so that I can lift that curly hair that might be laying right down on the scalp. I need to lift it into the comb guide so that it can be cut. So I'm going to begin blending this down. You might be surprised by how much bulk you can remove with a number 1, even though I skipped the half guard. And that's why I do it, because when I go back in with the half guard, it's just going to be light easy detail work, and I'm going to make myself not take it higher than I want to if I take this precaution. So again, working all the different directions of the curly hair, and as you can see, it's really softened up that line substantially. Now I can go back in with my half open, and I know exactly where I need to be. There's going to be no rework, no guesswork, no nothing. I literally am just going to soften out that area where it's a little bit dark and clean that up and make that transition smooth. Closing my taper down, using my corners, keeping it on an angle. As always, the same things over and over again. It's throw the line out there with it open, close it and stay just below it. The next step, throw the line out there with it open, new guideline with it open, stay just below that as you close it, close it, close it, close it, close it, and that's wiping out all that hair. And it's going to be a smooth transition, and don't be in a hurry to jump to the next step. Be thorough with your steps and you won't have to rework yourself. It's not uncommon to have to go back and do cleanup work, but I see a lot of barbers out here doing way too much cleanup work, where 90% of their video is cleanup work. And if that's what's happening to you, you have to be careful not to skip steps. So anyways, going back in, like I said, for a little bit of light cleanup with the open taper, and now I'm going to define my perimeters with the liner. Using the Andis GTX, I'm just going to make the line smooth, bald out the bottom, and I'm going to define that area that I'm working in. And don't worry if it's not perfect in this process, because we're going to go back with the straight razor, we're going to straighten it out, and we're going to make it perfect so that the line is just right on both sides. Personally, I try not to dig too much into the hairline, because when it grows back, it looks terrible. I consider that when I'm cutting hair. Some people are so obsessed with having it absolutely perfect that they'll push a client back 2 miles, and 3 days later he's walking around and he's at Target or something getting a coffee or whatever, and someone walks up to him and they're like, dude, your line got pushed back. That's 3 days after you cut it. Who cut it? You cut it. You look bad in 3 days. You look good today. So think about that. Balding them out with the Wall 5-star electric shaver at the very bottom, and my taper in the back is starting to look pretty clean. I'm just going to go through, use my straight razor, and I'm going to set the line just perfect on both sides. You really need to concentrate on knowing your strokes. It's really going to help you. I'm using a reverse backhand here, and it's actually incredibly helpful in this scenario with the way his neck is and the way I had to hold it to get it in there. It would have been too difficult, or I would have been in the way of the camera. So thankfully I have all my strokes in the bag and I can use them whenever I need to call on them. So coming down this right side, this would be the easy side for the right hander, and we're going to just finish straightening up this line. Notice how I stretch his skin, and a lot of times you can just hold the blade still and pull the skin into it, or you can hold the skin tight and pull the blade down. You know, you do whatever you feel comfortable with, but like I said, just want to get all this nice line work done so that it looks clean and I can move on to my next step. While I'm moving on to my next step, I'm going to finish balding them out at the bottom with the straight razor. He's watching the Hallmarks. Going back to the clipper over comb. If you lay the clipper over the comb, alright, let's say that you're using your I'm using a 5-0. Okay? If I'm using my 5-0 and I put it up against the comb, the thickness of the comb combined with the 5-0 is very close to the distance that the number 2 gave me. So I can essentially lay it right up against the scalp and lift it out just on the angle that I want, and I'm going to cut it right into the position that I want it. I'm not going to try to accomplish too much. This is for removal of bulk. This is to make life easier on yourself. But when you go through it, you want to be careful, and you don't want to take too much out in one step. As soon as you tip your comb out towards you, it's called rolling the comb, and begin cutting, and you can kind of see that smooth transition starting to come out just right. Using my Andis Slimline Pros, and I'm going to bald him out, but I'm going to leave the very front hairline alone so that I have something to shape up into. And like I said before, I'm trying to make it so that when it grows back, it looks good still. So you're going to see that I'm not going to dig into his hairline too deeply. I want to make sure that it looks clean and smooth. My directions in this haircut was he wants to try to grow his hair out, but he wants to look nice. And so we decided to fade the very bottom out and let him to continue his hair growth. Alright, so once I have this electric, I'm going to grab the electric shaver. In this case, the Bronze Series 9 is not going to do the job because I can't really fit it in there as easily. So I'll use the Wall 5-star, and I'm going to bald them out right at the sideburn, just at the bottom. Not too worried about wiping out that front hairline. I'm just going to take the corner of it and I'm going to use it. Again, if I go up, it's going to make a pretty strong line. I want to reduce my tension when I get to the point where I don't want to be making a line, and I can also come down with the grain, and that can help me so that I don't make an extra line. Open taper, and this is one of the times where actually flicking out is a very good, useful strategy, because we have to get this fade done and clean in a small amount of space, which means that we sort of have to skip some steps. We can't go in here and run 4 or 5 guards. He's going to have a bald taper up to his parietal ridge. We don't want that. I want to get this fade done smooth and clean in a small amount of distance, a steep fade. So you see me sort of flicking my blade out. As soon as you come up with the blade like this, right? If I angle it out like this a little bit more, I create a little bit more distance from the cutting teeth. And when I do that, I can flick out and I can look at each difference that's being made each time and decide that if I want to lower this, I'm going to take a little bit more. If I want to leave a little bit more, I can leave this out. And that's in the open position. That's going to help. So once I have it looking pretty clean, I see a little bit of a dark area just above. I'm going to use some clipper over comb. I'm going to go in and just lay it on that comb with a taper comb, tipping it out, rolling it out towards you, making small little changes, comb the hair back down into position, and see what little changes occurred and decide where you have to go next. Okay? I don't want to take out too much hair when I do the clipper over comb. I want to be careful and just take small steps and observe each little change that occurs. So now things are looking pretty good. I'm actually going to go in there with the 1 open just to soften that area above, and it's starting to look pretty clean. So any dark spots that I see, I could continue going in there, but at some point you're going to have to call it quits here. You have to decide, are you going to make it better or are you going to make it worse if you keep digging into it or doing anything. So make it look smooth, get rid of the dark spots, and we'll keep moving on to the other side. So once I have it all smoothed out and the fade is looking good, I'm going to go back with my liners and I'm going to put the line in. If you notice, when I do any arching, I can use a finger. A lot of times I'll use my middle finger, and no, I'm not flipping you off. I'm using my middle finger and I'm using it to create a circle. I'm using it to create a circle. So there's no guesswork here. I'm not hovering with the clipper. I'm not, no outside forces is going to change anything. I'm using an anchor. So I'm either putting my fingers up against his scalp while I work the clipper, and I use that anchor point whenever I can. I'll do the same thing for when I arc around the ears. I can take it just this way with my middle finger touching his cheek, and I can just tip my finger so that it's on a perfect axis with a perfect circular motion. And I could do it when I'm in the back coming forward also. In the back, middle finger on his cheek, tipping, arcing around. Okay, looking clean. Let's put the straight razor on him and let's keep it moving. I'm using a little bit of shave gel. And I'm going to begin, as I like to do, by taking it straight across the grain. I'm using the tip of the blade and I'm using the heel of the blade to create that nice arc shape. Again, don't dig too deep. there's no need to redefine his whole hairline, because in 3 days it's you who are going to look bad and him. I'll take this line right up to the top and I'll take care of the beginning of the front line, but there's something that kind of needs to happen before I get into that front line. I can't just do a lineup into this incredibly long length. It's way too bushy and it's not going to look clean when I do. So I'm going to go through and do a small front fade just with some clipper over comb. I want to taper that area down a little bit and get some of those long hairs out of my way, so that when I go in there with the trimmer, it's nice and smooth and it's nice and clean. So if your client has a high side and a low side, I always tell you guys to start on the lower side. Now if the client has no apparent problem going on with his hair, he's not going bald, nothing like that. If he has no apparent issues, you can start wherever you want. Wherever you feel comfortable is fine. Start in the middle, work out to the sides, start on the side. It doesn't really matter. You can still do it great no matter how you approach it. Again, another thing that I'm doing that you might not be able to see is I am anchoring with a knuckle on his scalp. I kind of am keeping a finger sliding along his scalp, and each time it's allowing me to stay steady and just arc that clipper right into his hairline so that I can stay accurate and do clean work. So don't worry about making it too perfect until it's time to use the straight razor. Then obviously we want it to be as perfect as possible. I'm going to go with the straight razor. I don't overwork myself with the trimmers when I know that I'm going to use the razor anyways. So now is the time to really get it perfect. I'm just going to follow the line I made with the trimmer, and I'm going to make sure that it's clean by looking in the mirror and making sure that it's straight. Sometimes when you're this close to it, it's hard to see. Use your mirror. If your mirror is 4 feet away, that's 4 feet there and 4 feet back. You're getting about 8 feet of perspective there, and that should be enough to tell you if it's crooked or if it's straight. It's never a bad idea to step back away from your work and have a good look at it. Going directly against the grain here in this corner, and I'll do the same thing on the other side, pulling any little hairs. But that's where the front fade came in. It knocked out some of those hairs that may have gotten in my way, and now I don't have to dig his hairline too deep into his hair. It's going to look good, and I can come directly against the grain, wipe out any little hairs there, and his edge up is starting to come around in the front pretty good. We're going to go into the scissor work here. I decided I'd just do the same thing on the other side. So right now I'm going to use some scissor work. I need to make sure that it's nice and smooth in this area where I was cutting, so I'm going to do a little scissor over comb, and I'm also going to do a little freehand scissor work. Okay, whenever you can do the inside of the scissor is kind of where you want to use it. You want to try to be cutting the hair down here in the inside of the scissor, because if you're in the inside of the shear, you're not going to be prone to making mistakes. If you use the tip, it's too easy to tip out and cut more than you meant to, but it's really easy to just use the inside of the shear and move your way around this way. So you see me doing that in this step. I'm using the inside of the shear just to shape it all and make it all look nice. Of course, I could do this all over the entire head. You're not going to be able to do everything with the inside of the scissor, so when you're working with the tip, please be careful, especially around the ear, because you could cut more hair than you mean to, or worse, you can cut the ear, and that would be catastrophic. So there's no reason for you to do that if you use your finger to steady the shear. So pretty much where we are right now is I've finished the haircut on both sides. I'm going to do a little spin here so you can see what happened, and everything is looking really nice. So it's all finished. I'm spinning them around. Everything's looking good, and I appreciate you guys tuning in and checking this out. Okay guys, that about wraps it up. I really appreciate you tuning in. I really appreciate you checking this out, and leave any comments, like, subscribe. That'd be great. Really helps me out. I want to make a small announcement that I have a really nice video coming up. It's kind of top secret. I really can't tell you too much, but it's going to really help you pick the clipper that you want to move forward with into the future. It'll help you slim down your station so you don't have 25 things plugged in, and it'll help you know and understand who has not only the best equipment but the best customer service and the best product all around. That's what I've been working on. I put a lot of work into it. I really can't wait to drop it, so please stick around. You're gonna want to see this one, and until my next video,